everyone, and welcome to No Offseason, presented by MassMutual. I'm Zena.
I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And I'm Ben Pickman.
And today on the show, we are diving into some of the most burning questions in the Western Conference this time. For instance, will the LA Sparks ever be good again? I know that sounds very existential, but it's a real question, folks. How do the Las Vegas Aces get back on top after having been back-to-back champions? And is Napheesa Collier the best basketball player in the world? Yes, we got to go into these questions. But before we go into that, let's just round up some quick news around women's basketball world. First up, Sarah Williams is officially off the market, or at least out of the transfer portal. The two-time All-Big Ten forward out of Wisconsin has chosen the UConn Huskies. So Husky Nation, get ready. This person is third leading scorer in the Big Ten last year, once a co-defensive player of the year candidate, or award winner, actually. So yes, Gino, don't retire just yet. On the other side of women's basketball in the WNBA world, some sad news out of Washington. Georgia Amoore, incoming rookie for the Mystics, has suffered an ACL injury. That's how it has been reported in her right knee. She has not been ruled out for the season, but that is what we know as of the time that we're recording. So definitely sending her some strength, some care, hopefully some fast healing for Georgia Amoore. And of course, we think about her Virginia Tech teammate, Elizabeth Kitley, that probably can be a really good source of support in this moment. Okay, so now let's dive into the Western Conference. After doing such a great job of recapping the Eastern Conference, we got to go into some of these big questions. And we're going to start with a team that had a recent dynasty in the WNBA. And I know some of y'all might feel like, dynasty? Hold up. Houston has something to say about that. Hold up. Minnesota may have something to say about that. But of course, we're talking about the Las Vegas Aces. The Aces, they won their back-to-back championship in 2022 and 2023. But last year, they didn't make it out of the second round of the playoffs. So I want to know, is the Aces, quote-unquote, dynasty over? And assuming that A'ja Wilson is still A'ja Wilson, let's just be real, she's A1, she's always going to be amazing, but how do the Aces improve? Because she was still on that team last year. So, Sabreena, I'm going to start with you. Is the Aces dynasty over?
I have so many thoughts on the word dynasty. I've always been really reluctant to use it for teams that don't win back-to-back, but we'll get that later. As far as the Aces dynasty, I realize you framed this as they didn't even get out of the second round, but they were one round away from the finals, right? Like, semifinals are one round away from the finals. It's not like they completely were out of contention of being among the best teams in the WNBA. And when you have a player as talented and as productive as A'ja Wilson, I think the ceiling is always going to be championship for this particular roster. So putting that out there right now, when you have A'ja Wilson, you deserve to be in that conversation. And I think the main problem last year was that Chelsea Gray was just not herself. She suffers the broken foot injury in 2023 in the WNBA Finals in Game 3, misses Game 4 of that series, misses the first part of the 2024 season. When she does come back, her numbers are just nowhere near what they, had been previously. She had 2 months during the WNBA season where she shot below 40% from the field, not just from three-point range, but from the field. She kind of had an uptick in September, but then her playoff numbers went back again, 38% from the field, 29% from three-point range. And it's just impossible to be as good as the Aces need to be if, the Robin to your Batman is not performing at all-world point guard level. And I think the reason for optimism with the Las Vegas Aces is because we saw Chelsea Gray during Unrivaled. And I think that point guard is back. She leads that Rose Basketball Club to a championship in the inaugural season of Unrivaled. She obviously has a full list of receipts of things that have been said about her in the past year, as, her play took a little dip because of the injury. And so to me, that is why I believe that the Aces are firmly back in this conversation, is because you still have A'ja Wilson, and now you have the player who looks exactly as good as she did during the 2022 and 2023 title runs.
I know, it kind of feels as if the Aces have now reacquired another player after seeing the way that Chelsea Gray played in Unrivaled. She was third best leading scorer on top of also averaging about 5 assists per game. Like, she was in top tip form and shape. And now that was not an off-season move that required to go, going on the market, but they did go on the market. The Aces did go and get Jewel Lloyd. And so You think about adding a Jewell Loyd into that mix, losing Kelsey Plum, but switching that out. Ben, how did some of these moves in the offseason you think maybe shaped the way that the Aces might look this season?
I mean, Jewell Loyd was, I think, the first player that I talked about last week when we did our most intriguing players list because, she has been a franchise centerpiece with the Seattle Storm over these, since she entered the WNBA. Now she's suddenly in a new destination with this Las Vegas Aces team. And she's coming off a year that, was an all-star year and was an Olympic year, but was a down year by her standards. I think I threw out some of her shooting numbers that, both her three-point percentage and field goal percentage were, at or, near at career lows for her last year, while her usage rate was at its highest it's been over the past 2 seasons. So Jewell Loyd is certainly one big player to watch. They also added some other, guard depth, notably in Dana Evans and Tiffany Mitchell. To me, though, I'm not sure that the Aces resolved one of the things that I think a lot of people highlighted as an issue or potential, point that opponents took advantage of, and that is their front court depth. I think that is still a question. Cheyenne Parker-Tyus, who has been an all-star center with the Atlanta Dream, she signed with the Aces this offseason, but she's going to miss at least the start of this season because she is pregnant with her second child. So we'll have to see if and when she does return at all. You got to think, A'ja Wilson last year had one of the best, if not the best, statistical seasons in WNBA history. Her usage rate, was the highest of her career, but her turnover percentage was the lowest of her career. It just tells you everything you kind of need to know. But one of the statistics that sticks out to me is that it was the most minutes she has ever played in her career. And only Dearica Hamby of front court players played more minutes than her. And so I'm still wondering, is it Megan Gustafson? Is it Elizabeth Kitley? Is it Kia Stokes? How are the Aces going to give A'ja just a little bit of rest during the regular season so that she is as fresh as she can be during the playoffs? Because that to me is still, it was a question people had last year when you look at this Aces team. It seems like they kind of ran out of gas, right? A little bit. And part of that is not just A'ja, fatigue, but it is what Sabreena was saying with Chelsea Gray. So that to me is still kind of an open question as this season approaches.
And speaking of that front court depth, it's going to be even more challenging for the Aces because they lost Alicia Clark, who was their primary power forward next to A'ja in those small ball lineups too. So, you look at that roster and there really isn't a power forward in that grouping who can move A'ja to the center to give them more lineup versatility in those situations. So, yeah, like Ben said, I think the front court depth is a real concern. It's hard for me to get too worked up at that when you still have A'ja, Chelsea Gray, and Jackie Young, and presumably a rejuvenated Jewell Loyd in this new situation.
No, it's a great point, and I'm happy you mentioned that because what I was going to call out is the fact of it's how you use A'ja Wilson. I mean, you look at her numbers from, this past season in comparison to seasons before, she's putting up way more shots, field goal attempts on basket. She's having to be a hub of offense, putting up more three-point shots, being involved in more assists, as you mentioned, Ben, having less turnovers and just being more dialed in with her game overall in the way that she's contributing. But loving to do that in the 4 position as opposed to more so in that 5 position, but she's interchangeable. So the question is really around how does A'ja Wilson's season look? And my question is, can she get any better than she was last year?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily a question of better. To me, one of the actual questions is, can they make life easier on her, right? One of the things that's kind of sneaky interesting about the Aces is that, last year, for instance, A'ja Wilson, arguably the best forward in the sport, player in the sport, but they were only 10th in terms of paint points around the WNBA. And they're only league average in terms of points scored at the free throw line, right? Those are two simple kind of categories that teams look at in terms of shot profile and say can we make life a little bit easier by getting more things, easy paint points and getting more at the free throw line. They're not the only team that is looking at their shot profile. New York, similarly, sneakily doesn't get that many of their points in the paint or at the free throw line, much like the Las Vegas Aces. So they're not an outlier. The Aces aren't. But if I'm Becky Hammon and her coaching staff, which has also, we should say, gone through, almost a total overhaul, right? With her 2 top assistants, Natalie Nakase going to the Golden State Valkyries and Tyler Marsh going to the Chicago Sky. If I'm that staff, I'm trying to come up with ways to get A'ja easy offense. and make life, again, like it's all about making things easier on her and the players around her so that when the games really do matter, like this is his team that is clicking on all cylinders and as fresh as it can possibly be.
Yeah, of course, with A'ja, as you mentioned, having gone up, she averaged just 30 minutes per game, going up to almost 35 minutes the next season. That is a lot of more stress on a body, especially when you are the focal point of a defensive scout. When you are the focal point of an offense moving and being in motion, it's a lot of strain on a body. And so making things easy is going to be key. Now, you mentioned overhaul. Lots of movement for the Aces in the front office. Obviously made some offseason moves, trying to bring in some youth as well. A team that looks pretty much the same going into this season is the league's runner-up from last season, and that's the Minnesota Lynx. They got a player. She goes by Fee, also known as Napheesa Collier, who some on this very panel may argue is the greatest player in the world. So let's talk about it. Let's discuss it. Is Fee the best player in the world? She didn't win the MVP last year. Probably should have, definitely was in the conversation, but didn't win it last year. Didn't win the title last year. Wasn't enough to will her team to a championship title, but we saw the numbers she was putting up. Two-way player. We've seen the performance, of course, getting MVP in the unrivaled league. So now, Fee's star power, is that going to be enough to power the Lynx to the top of the league this year?
I mean, speaking of players who absorb very high minute loads, I think Napheesa Collier is number one on that list. During the playoffs last year, she played 39 minutes per game and led the league in points, rebounds, steals, blocks, free throws, all of those categories during the postseason. She also averaged 35 minutes per game during the regular season, and I think, she didn't seem to wear down at all during the postseason, so I can't imagine that the directive is to lessen that load at all during the regular season, especially because I'm sure that Napheesa Collier would love to add a WNBA MVP to her trophy case, which also includes that one-on-one title in Unrivaled, for what it's worth. Just a fantastic offseason, WNBA offseason, I should say, for Napheesa Collier. But yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this on the previous episode about how teams sort of have to go through one run together before they can really coalesce into that championship-worthy team. And, New York had to do it in 2023, and Vegas had to do it in 21 and before they got to, their back-to-back titles. And Minnesota now has that heartbreak to look back on, right? They lost in 5 games in possibly the most excruciating way possible in the WNBA finals. And they are, I believe, the last team in WNBA history to lose a title in 5 games and then come back and win the next year. So you look at all of the ingredients they have, the continuity, the fact that Fee is on this incredible run, that they did lose Cheji Zandalasini during the offseason in that expansion draft. I think Carly Samuelson is a really excellent placeholder, though, just to fill in that role pretty seamlessly. Add a little front court depth with Marine Badiem from France, their center, and they brought Jess Shepard back, who has been in the organization before. So I just like everything they did on the margins. I think the fact that they have all of this continuity and know exactly what they're going to look like is going to be a huge advantage just in terms of stacking wins at the start of the season. And if you get that game 7 this year in Target Center versus somewhere else, that's a big deal. So I love their chances of starting the season off strong, building a really good case for home court advantage. And then, like you said, I'm of the belief that nobody's playing better than Napheesa Collier right now. I mean, in those matchups against the Las Vegas Aces, I think she outplayed A'ja Wilson. So that's a high bar to set, understandably, considering what A'ja did during the regular season last year. But again, like I said with the Aces, when you have a player who is of that capability, like an Napheesa Collier, like an A'ja Wilson, you're in the championship conversation. And the Lynx should settle for nothing short of that this year.
Yeah, it made sense that A'ja Wilson finished number 1 in the All-Star, or the MVP voting, and right behind her was Napheesa Collier, who ended up winning Defensive Player of the Year. So sometimes people say that kind of splits out and levels out. But with the fact that you've got a Napheesa Collier and she is rolling, like there's been no stoppage in her game and the growth of her game, and you've got the continuity, I love the way you put that, of just this entire team, you're looking at training camp and you're like, okay, so what are we doing here, folks? Like, is this basically early practice? And it's been funny to watch, Ben, their content coming out of their camp, their social media content of Courtney Williams, Kayla McBride, and Napheesa, just having a ton of fun on one end of the court. And then basically some peripheral players I hope to join this team as well. What does their training camp look like?
I mean, their roster is super competitive, and Sabreena kind of threw out some of the key additions or key changes to it. Samuelson, Badian, getting Jess Shepard back. all of it adds to this super competitive training camp so far, right? And some of the big questions, like I threw out in our most intriguing list, what is going to happen with Dorka Juhas? Is she even going to report? She hasn't reported yet after a season in Skio. What happens with Alyssa Peely, who is their first-round pick, number 8 in the 2024 WNBA draft? It's clear that, Cheryl Reeve has been praising, Diamond Miller so far. But I think it remains to be seen what the Lynx are going to get from Diamond Miller this year and just how they're going to use her after last year. And then they went outside Grace Berger, who is a super solid WNBA player to more than the league minimum. Like, we'll see if she even makes the team or if she gets cut or they deal her somewhere else. Like they brought in a player from Russia, Kosu, number 15 overall in their draft. She came over to camp. It would seem maybe unlikely on the surface that they draft a foreign player, bring her over, and then cut her right away. So we'll have to see what happens there. It's just a really interesting and very competitive camp, especially with Jess Shepard coming back after she had previously played internationally a couple years and didn't come back over last year when they won in this finals run. I would say, to Sabrina's point, Sabreena, can you just tell everyone a little bit of the history of the 2016 WNBA Finals for context? Because I think that is the most, that is so instructive when thinking about this team, this Minnesota Lynx team, because we have this team that obviously lost in a heartbreaking 5 games. And Lindsay Whalen and Rebecca Brunson, 2 Cheryl Reeve assistant coaches, were on that 2016 team that lost to the Sparks in 5 games and then came back the next year. Can you just paint that picture for people who don't know?
Yeah, so the Minnesota Lynx were in the middle of this 7-year run where they won 4 titles in the odd years, 11, 13, 15, and 17. And in 2016, they played the Los Angeles Sparks in the finals, which was the first year of the new playoff format, which is why 2 Western Conference teams were allowed to go up against one another. And they lose in this heartbreaking Game 5 where they basically, Neko Gumake scores a game winner on the final Sparks possession of the game, and it's revealed that she got the shot off after the shot clock expired, and they were unable to review it. And Cheryl Reeve went into the offseason with just the most rage you could possibly imagine after this call went against Minnesota. And if you think about how the finals ended last year with all of those reviews and all of those foul calls that seemingly did not go in the Lynx' favor down the stretch of Game 1 and Game 5, there is a very similar feeling to how they felt wronged by 2016. They feel wronged by 2024. And in 2017, they brought back the same band, and they came back and they faced the Sparks again. And this time they won in 5 games. And they're bringing back the same band this time, right? And they have a player who is as good as any player in the league in Napheesa Collier, just like they did with Maya Moore back then. Maybe they don't have the same historical depth that they did with Simone Augustus, Lindsay Whalen, and Rebecca Brunson, but it is a very talented team. I mean, did mention Kayla McBride. Her unrivaled season was also fantastic for the Laces. So I think there is a lot of similarity to be drawn just in terms of how that finals transpired, just the real rage and fury that must have been lingering after the way it happened. And it's still Cheryl Reeve's team, and I think she knows exactly how to play those cards during this offseason, during this training camp, to inspire the right amount of motivation, but also channel it into the right targets.
It is fascinating how history tends to repeat itself. And Coach Reeves referenced a little bit of that, alluded to the raise that she had from 2016 to the same feelings that she had in last season's ending. And, the quote was, "This was stolen from us." So let's see what Napheesa Collier and band can do in this upcoming season. And on that point of Unrivaled, top scorer in Unrivaled, Napheesa Collier. Second best scorer, Kayla McBride. All righty, let's keep it going. Okay, so let's move it on over to the West Coast. Again, I don't think the Aces are the West Coast, but, let's get back over to the West.
Let's talk about the LA. I think they are.
Okay. I mean,
I just assume because we're talking about Minnesota, so back to the West,
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. Okay. So let's talk about the LA Sparks. And, Sabreena, you're not a homer by any chance, but you got a stake in this one. Absolutely not. Definitely not. So I got a very, 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 very simple question for you. Will the Sparks ever be good again?
It's such a rude question, Zena.
It is. I know. And I'm going to blame our producers on this one. I don't think they're that bad, but dang, we got to ask the question. We got to ask it. Go ahead.
All right, so just to lay out some context here, the Sparks have missed the postseason for the last 4 seasons. That is the longest streak that they have not been in the playoffs in franchise history. This is one of the league's original franchises, played in the first game in WNBA history, have 3 titles, including the aforementioned 2016 win over Minnesota, but things have sort of gone to since then. This is really the first offseason that I would say there has been a lot of hope for what could happen this year, right? Because you have Kelsey Plum coming in, a real bona fide all-star, 2-time Olympian, 2-time gold medalist. You've got Dearica Hamby, multi-time all-star, right? Also Olympic medalist from this 2024 3x3 run. And then you have Rickea Jackson coming off a great rookie season. Cameron Brink will return presumably around June from her ACL tear. And then, some good depth around there, like Azari Stevens, Julia Almond, Ray Burrell, Odyssey Sims. Like there's some things to work with. The problem is everybody in the league appears to be going for it this year. And the Sparks are another one of those teams that is also going for it. So for them to have raised their talent level has to be commensurate with how much everybody else raised their talent level. Because we're talking about a team that finished 8-32 in 2024. Like they had some really surprising wins, 2 against the Aces, 1 against the Liberty, and then shockingly just got swept by the Atlanta Dream, like things that happened during the 2024 season. But I think the Sparks can be okay this year. I don't know about good yet, but it's new coach, a lot of new pieces, a lot of younger players. They have what I would say is a nice foundation to be good in the future. I'm not sure if this is the year that it's going to happen.
I mean, there is an opportunity, Ben, for some offense to kick off. Of course, we saw Rickea Jackson in her freshman campaign continue her walking bucket brand from Tennessee into the league. One of those players that everyone said she is pro ready. And now you pair her up against, alongside a Kelsey Plum. You add Cameron Brink, who literally still, even having played only 15 games before going down with her ACL tear, was a Defensive Player of the Year candidate, could have been in that conversation. You put that all together, I mean, this could be some legitimate pieces out in LA. What are your thoughts, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, the offense is great, and we're going to see, that is Lynn Roberts' calling card, I guess. That I think is part of the court you would expect them to be, towards the top half of the league with, they're going to shoot a ton of threes, as her teams did at Utah. I would expect them to play fast. Kelsey Plum is really going to have the ball in her hand a ton. If you told me that she led the league in usage rate at the end of the season, I wouldn't be shocked. She's going to have to do a lot of creating for them. I still think the question, though, is on the defensive end of the court, where they were one of the 3 worst defenses in the league last year. And, one of those defenses that was not very good also was the Dallas Wings. And we saw them, add one of the league's best defensive players in Dejanay Carrington. And I think, you have someone in Chris Koklanis who's MO in the past has been on the defensive end of the floor. You have the Indiana Fever, who were slightly worse than the Los Angeles Sparks on the defensive end. And, if they want to be a championship contender, they sure as better be better on the defensive end of the floor. And that was the LA Sparks, who obviously want to be better on the defensive end of the floor, but we still don't know what we're kind of getting on that end. And Cameron Brink should obviously help when she does return, but it's unfair to expect her to be, at the level she was at the first part of her rookie season when she does return. So, I think there are a lot of questions there. I mean, look, they have a lot of things that Sabreena said that people should like. Ray Burrell was a real bright spot in Unrivaled. She was a player that from the very beginning of the league, people called out as a name to watch. And they have some interesting young players Shanice Swain is another one, was a second-round pick of theirs in recent years who's coming over from Australia and should make, an impact on this team. But it still feels like they to me are still much more in the 7 to 10 conversation than anywhere else. They've gotten better, but so has the rest of the league. And so I don't know if it's going to net out that much different.
Speaking of bright spots during Unrivaled, I think people were very impressed with Rickea Jackson's defense and the way that she played. It was a lot better than a lot of people expected, I think. And then also Dearica Hamby. I mean, she had to switch 1 through 3, obviously, during the 3x3 tournament in Paris, but also playing Unrivaled basketball forces you to have to guard some guards as well. So maybe those two will step it up in a way that Los Angeles can capitalize on. Let's turn our attention to the team a little bit up north with the number 2 pick, Dominique Malonga, the Seattle Storm. Just a little bit of clouds around the Seattle Storm right now, but there is a bright spot in Dominique Malonga being able to join this team. What do you think her impact will be right away for the Storm, Ben?
Well, first we should say she has not reported to training camp as we tape this, at the end of April. Noelle Quinn said at the beginning of a training camp that she expects to have an update on Dominique Malonga's status next week. So we shall see if and when she eventually does report. I mean, I think the benefit of the situation she is walking into, Dominique Malonga, that is that like she doesn't have to be a star right away. Like you have Nneka Ogwumike still in the front court, and you also have Ezi Magbagor, who is coming off a really, really, really good EuroLeague season. She actually led her team and was one of the key players for Prague as they won the EuroLeague title this year and had upset a stacked team, Fenerbahce, the Turkish club, in the EuroLeague semis. So like, she's had a really good offseason and she's coming off of, and Ezi and Gabby Williams are actually reporting to camp right now. They are in camp, which is very rare for both of them. So I think that should certainly help in the continuity of this team. They still are talented. Like Magbagor, Nneka Ogwumike, and Skylar Diggins are all all-star caliber players. And so this team is talented. And Malonga, who, again, she's coming over from France with, French competition having just ended for her. But, like, can they make the leap? That's really the question. And I am not totally convinced. I don't know what Sabreena thinks on that either.
Yeah, I think the problem with Seattle last year was their lack of shooting. It below 30% from three-point range for the entire season, which is just, I can't even like really wrap my head around how bad of a number that is for a team that like had Jewel Lloyd on it. Just doesn't make a ton of sense. But, obviously we've mentioned how Jewel didn't have her best season in Seattle. So you look at the additions they made during the offseason, full season of Gabby Williams, I don't think is going to particularly help the shooting, but bringing in Alicia Clark, Lexi Brown, Kate Lou Samuelson, those are all players who should at least improve the spacing, if not like get them to an above average 3-point shooting team, But I'm kind of with Ben here. Like there's a lot of veterans that I really like on this team. It's kind of an old team other than Ezi, and that's where I'm really looking for Dominique Malonga to have an impact because like it's a long season. It's 44 games, right? It may not be as condensed as it was last year because there is no Olympic break this season, but it is a slog to get through these 44 games. And when you have players who are all in their 30s on the latter half of their career, you need some young blood to just soak up some minutes to give you some verve on those days when like some people just don't have it. And unfortunately, Jordan Horston out for the season with a torn ACL, Nika Mule out for the season with a torn ACL. So that young infusion of talent is going to come either from their later round draft picks like a Jordan Hobbs or Serena Sandell, or more likely it's going to come from Dominique Malonga. And we already know that she's going to be out for part of the season because of Eurobasket. How much time she spends with the French national team before that is still an open question. But I do kind of think they need her to just provide some pace, some like energy to this team, because as much as I like all of their individual players, they're kind of slow. They're kind of like methodical. It's a veteran team, and there are good advantages to having veterans, but also I think there needs to be just something of a balance. And it looks like Malonga and Ezi are the only ones who are going to be able to provide that.
Yeah. I'm hoping that Skylar Diggins will bring that from Unrivaled too. That's something that we saw her do. Try to push the pace, try to utilize her defense into offense a lot more. And so maybe that will give them a little bit of a boost. But you're absolutely right. I'm looking at this roster and everybody's older. And the crazy thing is like, it's
they're
like,
don't get me wrong.
They're all, that's what I'm saying. Yeah. That's what I'm saying is like, everyone's older, but they're also like legitimate all-stars. And so now you're trying to figure out like, how is that going to play across the rest of the league? Because as we just mentioned with the LA Sparks, like, yeah, they got better, but everyone else got better. It's like with the Seattle Storm, it's like, I don't know how much better they got, but everyone else also has youth. And that's where they're kind of lacking in that regard. You talked about draft assets. Of course, they just got Dominique Malonga. Where does Seattle sit with their draft assets? Like, what could they do next year in trying to fill this gap of age, I guess, on their team?
Well, they have 3 first-round picks in the 2026 draft, so they could, just wait it out and add those players to the roster because, again, we've said this ad nauseum, nobody knows what the rosters are going to look like in 2026 when basically every veteran in the league other than Kalani Brown, Lexi Brown, and Yvonne Anderson are free agents. So you could wait it out and just get younger next year, or that's a very attractive trade package if you want to do something during the course of the regular season. If a team's team season isn't going the way they want it to and they're trying to unload some veteran players, well, Seattle has about as good of a war chest as anybody else to swoop in for a good deal there.
There you go. Okay. Wait, you said it was Lexi Brown, Kalani Brown, and who's the third player?
Yvonne Anderson from Connecticut.
Perfect. The Browns and Yvonne Anderson. I will remember it that way. Perfect. All right, let's move it over to Phoenix because we already did a deep dive on the Dallas Wings. Definitely go back and check out that episode. And we're going to do a deep dive on the Valks next week. So those two teams are going to be covered extensively, but let's close it out with Phoenix because they're the final team that we haven't discussed yet. And let's just be real. Sabreena, you already said your thoughts on what you think the Phoenix Mercury or how they will land. And you know what's hilarious? I saw a tweet recently where someone said, I just looked at the Phoenix roster. Yeah, they don't look as stacked as I thought they would. And I think that is the resounding effect of everyone like hearing big names coming, Satu Sabali, Alyssa Thomas. But then you also have to remember, Diana Taurasi retired. Brittany Griner is gone. No more Sophie Cunningham. Like, no more Natasha Cloud. Like, there's a lot of exodus as well out of Phoenix. So we got to talk about this. Like, what are thoughts on Phoenix? Sabreena, you win already. I think you've expressed your thoughts that you're like, they might underperform. Ben, I want to hear what you think.
Well, I thought you were going to say, you have to remember that this is a 5-on-5 league and not a 3-on-3 league because their team looks a lot better if this was a 3-on-3 league, like Unrivaled, than it is a 5-on-5 league, right? Like
they're elite, right? Exactly.
Right. And so, like, it's just you go down the roster and there are a lot of questions about who else is going to contribute and what it's going to look like. I mean, some of the other names and nobody loves it. It's not exactly great audio to just name a player, but like maybe this should have been a C block segment for us. Like we could just name the rest of the roster. I mean, Sammy Wickham's going to play a big role. It seems like Sevgi Uzun, who's a Turkish guard who came from the Dallas Wings. She's well positioned to play. Kit Laksa, who is a good shooter, European player, veteran European player. She's also seems like she's going to play. Natasha Mack is, should seemingly be in their rotation. Celeste Taylor, if she makes the team. I mean, Nate Tibbetts, their head coach, has kind of been open so far in training camp that they are going to play positionless basketball. And that makes a lot of sense because, Alyssa Thomas is one of your best players and she can play any position. And so you better play positionless to bring the best out of her because if you're not bringing the best out of her, then like, who else are you bringing the best out of? So, like, again, the big three is great and it really could work. Like it's a really interesting trio of players who are super, super dynamic. But what if one of them gets hurt? What if it doesn't click? What if it takes time to develop? Like there's just a lot of question marks here with this team that it's hard to feel like convinced that they're going to be top 4, which is seemingly what the top end talent would indicate. But if you go down the rest of the list, it doesn't really seem that way.
Yeah. And of course, when you mention the big three, Kalia Copper, Satu Sabali, Alyssa Thomas, and it's a interesting factor of, Alyssa Thomas is someone that can bring the ball up the floor just as much as she is someone that can post up and operate in the mid post, et cetera. She is someone that needs the ball in her hands. She's not a huge off-ball mover. Satu Sabali can be an off-ball mover, but she also likes the ball in her hands. Kalia Copper definitely likes the ball in her hands. So I'm kind of looking at this offense and being like, I wonder what's going to happen here. I'm very interested to see how all of this shakes out. All right, let's dive into our rapid-fire questions for the Western Conference. Ben, I'm going to start with you. Which free agent signing will have the most impact?
Nel Salone, the French forward who is 23 years old and set up to play a potentially big role on the Golden State Valkyries.
Okay. And then Sabreena, what about you?
She's not exactly a spring chicken, but she is a 3-time title winner and was very good for the Aces over these last 2 seasons. I think just her spacing, her ability to help Seattle play small a little bit because she can toggle between the 3 and the 4. And just the fact that she really loves being in Seattle. Clearly, that was where she had the biggest stretch of her WNBA career is going to be a huge impact there.
Those 2 free agents sound great. let's move it on to regime. Which new regime are you most interested in seeing?
How can this not be the Golden State Valkyries? I mean, again, we're going to go long
I
on
think
them,
so.
but they're a totally new team and a totally new regime of Natalie Nakase, Anohama Nien, and the general manager. And it's an expansion team. Like, how can you not be interested, most interested in seeing how they play out? So, a little bit of a cop-out there, but I'm sticking with it.
I like it.
I'm actually really interested
Sabrina?
in Las Vegas Aces. I realize they do not have a new head coach, but they did part ways with their general manager, Natalie Williams, during the offseason, and it's sort of unclear exactly who is making personnel decisions between Nikki Fargas, Becky Hammond. They have a lot of new assistant coaches, too, which is a big change. So I'm wondering, like, how much of this success over the past few years was Becky and the core four, and how much of it was a product of everything Tyler and Natalie and, Natalie Williams brought in. So, yeah, I mean, it's not an entirely new regime, but they have a very high bar for success. And when you have expectations, I'm just always interested to see how people are going to meet those.
Absolutely. Okay, first time All-Star. Sabreena, you go first.
Paige Beckers.
Nice. I got you. Ben Pickman.
I don't really need to explain that.
Yep, I feel you. Go ahead, Ben.
Alana Smith of the Minnesota Lynx, a player who has been on my All-Star ballot in the past, an all-W second-team defender, someone who's chronically underrated among fans and people in the general public, who is super, super important to the Minnesota Lynx elite defense. I think she should have made the All-Star team last year. She's continued to be one of the most improved players in the league for like the last 2 or 3 seasons. Maybe this is the year she finally gets her due.
Okay. My rapid fire, it's just tough. That free agent aspect is so tough because a lot of these big time names going places were trades. So I'm just gonna not answer that one. New regime, absolutely Golden State. Absolutely very curious, not only for them in general, but this sets up the other expansion teams. How is Toronto going to learn from them? How is Portland going to learn from them? What does this look like entering this new version of the WNBA? And then last but not least, Sabreena, you and I, we right here. Paige Beckers, All-Star. There's not much else she needs to say. Let's just be real. All right, let's close it out with one little fun game. All right, so we are going to do another new game because we like to try new things. It's fun. And we're going to do something called blind ranking. I'm sure you've heard of it before, but I'm going to throw out some names. And I'm going to want Ben and Sabreena to do their individual blind rankings. And I'm going to tell you, these are dynamic duos in the Western Conference. Now, they're particularly duos of a new player and an old player. That's not necessarily like new in birth,
returning
how
player,
old they are,
say.
or returning player. Thank you. Returning player, exactly. And I want to have you guys blind rank. I'm going to give you 5. Who's going to be the
number
most
one open for Kelsey Plum and De'Arca Hamby? Clearly,
you don't know if that's what I'm going to ask. You don't know. Yeah, because that's the thing. The pairings may not be exactly what you think. Because again, who never knows? You never know if they'll be dynamic. But the point is, blind rank them based off of these 5. Put them in position. I want to see where you guys end up. You guys ready?
So just to clarify, you want me and Ben to do this separately or together?
Ooh, actually, you know what? Do it together. Do it together. I think it should be a group exercise now that I think about it. Here we go. Ready? First up, Paige Beckers, Arike Gumbawale.
They're going to be pretty good, Sabreena. They're going to be pretty good.
I mean, pretty good, yeah. But the West is also very good. I'm thinking like 3-ish. That's where I'm landing.
I think that's
super
super
right out of
reasonable.
5?
Yeah.
Okay,
As a potential old and new, I think that might be the right spot.
All right.
Okay. Kelsey Plum, Rakia Jackson.
Way less fun. What do you think, Ben?
Well, I'm trying to project the pairings here is really where I'm
Right.
at, because I think if Zena plays her cards right now, the Phoenix Mercury are well positioned to be our number 1, right? And Alyssa Thomas and Satu, or
Kalia
like
Copper?
Satu and Ka is your kind of best new returning pair that is still out there. But if she
Okay.
throws it out with a wild card then I think we're screwed, So where are you at? That's my logic.
I was thinking like 4, because I assume Jewel plus Ace will be one of the top 2 as well.
It's a great call. Let's go 4.
Yeah.
Okay. This is gonna be fun. Dominique Malonga, Ezzy Magbagor.
That's really fun. That's my number 1 in my heart, but not in production.
I guess we should have asked as a setup question. We should ask the setup question. Are you gonna pick? How are you picking 5 teams, 5 pairs here? Because are you?
Not every team will be represented. Yeah, not every team will be represented. That's all I can say.
We're absolutely screwed.
If the Aces and Mercury are not in, we are screwed with this blind ranking. Yeah, let's say 5 and let's take a chance here.
Okay,
and we could totally
I think Malonga and Magbagor is 5.
5.
Yeah.
5. Okay.
There's a lot of good players left.
Chelsea Gray, Jewel Lloyd.
Okay, so we have Golden State, Minnesota, or Phoenix left, right?
Yeah, you better pick Phoenix.
I don't think Golden State's going to be better than this. Chelsea Gray is fantastic. I was hoping it'd be Asia and it'd be a no-brainer number 1, but then and the thing is if we go Minnesota, it's going to be Napheesa Collier plus Carly Samuelson.
Yeah, no, it has to be Phoenix or we're screwed, so.
Okay. I kind of just want to leave it at number 1 for the vibes, but
yeah. Let's do it. We'll do 1 there.
Okay.
Okay. Last but not least, Ka Copper, Alyssa Thomas.
All right, perfect. We did it right. Okay, we'll slide them in 2. Certainly a reasonable case can be made that they should be number 1 in this exercise, but I feel way better about how we did now knowing that those were the last 2. Had you picked the Golden State Valkyries, this exercise would have been
really
flop.
disappointed.
Why don't you read it back, Zena? Why don't you read it back for us?
Okay, so you guys started with number 1, Chelsea Gray, Jewel Lloyd.
Uh-huh.
Well done. Then Ka Copper, Alyssa Thomas at number 2.
Uh-huh.
And then Paige Beckers, Arike Gumbawale, number 3.
Uh-huh.
Dominique Malonga, Ezzy Magbagor at number 4.
At 5.
Or 5,
No,
excuse me, 5.
Yeah. And then we had
5.
Kelsey and Rikia.
And then Kelsey Plum and Rikia number 4. Okay. All right. This will be interesting. Now, the thing about it is I couldn't do the Valkyries because technically everyone's not a returning player. There's no returners. So I was like, why are you guys even including them? They're all new.
I was thinking
well done.
Expansion draft players versus non-expansion draft players in my head.
That's fair. Well done, guys. Well done. All right, folks. That is going to be it for today. Like I mentioned, coming up next week, we are going to do a Golden State Valkyries deep dive. All non-returning players, obviously. What does this upcoming season look like for the newest addition to the W? And what is next on the horizon for expansion? So we're going to get all into that. And if you haven't yet, hit that follow button wherever you're listening so you never miss a pod. And hey, why not come check us out on YouTube? Sabrina's giggle is so much cuter on video. Also, drop us a comment wherever you're listening. We love to read them. And if you'd be so kind, give us a rating. It really helps new people find the show. Also, don't forget, there's more to read and watch over our partner, Yahoo Sports Hub. So check it out, sports.yahoo.com/women-sports. On behalf of The Athletic, I'm Zena Keda. Thanks for listening. We will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to No Offseason. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.